Pam Bondi had entered the courtroom for what seemed like a routine hearing, but within minutes, she would find herself facing one of the toughest confrontations of her life. And this time, the person she was up against wasn't a criminal. It was the judge himself. That morning, Pam had arrived early at the Tampa courthouse, just as she always did. She wore a navy blazer, her hair neatly tied back. With a briefcase in hand and clarity in her eyes, she looked fully prepared. The case of the day was an ordinary one, a simple licensing dispute. With her legal experience, it was something she could have resolved over a cup of coffee. As she stepped into the courtroom, she scanned the room. Everything was as usual. The clerk was organizing notes, the court reporter was quietly reviewing the computer screen, and a couple of attorneys were whispering in the gallery. It was all standard, until the door opened and the judge walked in. Judge Raymond Jeffers, known for his strict demeanor and rigid adherence to the rules. Tall, sharp-jawed, and with a face that radiated authority. When their eyes met, Pam thought to herself, "I've never dealt with this man before. Hopefully today is about the law, not ego." But from the very first minute, it was clear something was off. As soon as Judge Jeffers took his seat, he began speaking without even looking at the case file. This court has determined that the defendant has violated Article 3 of Florida state law. Therefore, an administrative fine of $85,000 is hereby imposed. The courtroom instantly fell silent. Pam Bondi froze for a moment, stunned by the judge's unexpected ruling. A heavy stillness hung in the air. She slowly lifted her eyes toward Jeffers. Only minutes had passed since the hearing began, and the judge had issued an $85,000 penalty without so much as glancing at the file. This wasn't just a legal decision. This was a direct challenge to her background, to her presence. As she sat at the table, her thoughts began to race, preparing for a battle. Something's not right here. A decision this fast. This isn't a hearing. It's an execution. She took a deep breath and looked the judge in the eyes. There was a cold, calculating, condescending expression on his face. Jeffers removed his glasses and slowly placed them into his jacket pocket. That small gesture was a show of power. Pam thought to herself, "This man doesn't even want to hear me. This isn't about the law anymore. It feels like a personal vendetta." She slowly stood up, lightly touched the folder in front of her, then pulled her hand back. She knew more than what was inside that file. This battle would be won with words. In a loud, firm voice, she said, "Your Honor, you're issuing a penalty in a case that hasn't been presented and where no defense has been heard. This is a clear violation of constitutional rights, specifically the right to a fair defense." Judge Jeffers put his glasses back on, a dismissive smirk forming on his face. "Ms. Bondi, I'm not surprised that an experienced attorney like yourself still finds the strength to object in the face of a clear violation. But this court does not rely on evidence alone. We act on truth to maintain public order." Pam thought to herself, "Truth without evidence, Jeffers. What are you trying to do? Humiliate me?" She raised her voice again, speaking with strength. "Truth is revealed through due legal process. Public order is upheld through justice, not arbitrary decisions. The ruling you've issued against me today doesn't just affect me. It reflects on this courtroom, on you, and on the entire system. And I am here to make that reflection clear. At the very least, ground your decision in legal authority." Judge Jeffers leaned back in his chair, pressing his fingertips together. "I will not open this hearing to further debate. The court has ruled." Pam knew there was no turning back now. She turned toward the court stenographer. "Please enter this into the record. This court has obstructed my right to a defense. I will be appealing this decision to the Florida Court of Appeals, and the press will certainly be following it closely." Whispers spread through the courtroom. Attorneys lifted their heads, eyes turned toward Bondi. In that moment, something inside everyone seemed to shift. This was no longer just a hearing. This was a reckoning with the conscience of the system. Pam slowly opened her bag and pulled out a photocopy of a court ruling. She held it up toward the judge. "Your Honor, Henderson versus City of St. Petersburg, 2016. Just like today, a judge issued a penalty while disregarding the defendant's right to a proper defense. Do you know what happened next? The higher court overturned the ruling, and that judge was placed under disciplinary investigation. For the first time, the judge's expression shifted. His lips were dry. He swallowed but said nothing. He glanced at the court reporter, then up at the ceiling. Finally, he looked back at Bondi and asked, "Are you threatening me, Ms. Bondi?" "Pam, no. I'm just reminding you. You may hold authority in this courtroom, but the boundaries of the law apply to all of us." Then she addressed the entire courtroom, her voice echoing with clarity. "Justice begins with procedure. If I'm being denied my right to a defense today, who will be silenced in this courtroom tomorrow? This isn't a personal matter. It's about whether the system operates fairly." Jeffers's cheeks flushed red. He shifted in his seat, trying to mask his tension. But Pam didn't stop. Her voice was sharp and clear. "Today you are judging me, but in truth you're putting your own legal legitimacy to the test. If you insist on this ruling, I have an appeal ready to file, and the press is waiting outside." In that moment, time seemed to freeze in the courtroom. The judge was silent. He lowered his eyes to the floor. Finally, in a hushed tone, he said, "This hearing will recess for 15 minutes. He left the room. Pam didn't move from her seat. People around her had lowered their heads, but a few tried to meet her gaze, with respect, with admiration. After the break, the judge returned. His voice was lower, more subdued. "The ruling has been withdrawn, considering the right to a defense. The hearing will be restarted." Pam remained seated. She only gave a slight nod. There was no triumph in her eyes, only the weight of responsibility. Her inner voice echoed, "This wasn't a victory. This was a reminder of justice. And against those who forget it, the strongest weapon is knowledge and resolve." As she walked out of the courtroom, a young intern whispered behind her, "One day, I'm going to be just like her." That day, Pam Bondi didn't just win a case. She stood tall against corruption, silencing an arbitrary power within the system. And she spoke aloud what everyone else had been quietly thinking. Justice should stand not with the powerful, but with the righteous. And what about you? If you were in that courtroom today, would you have stayed silent? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories like this and to support our work. See you in the next video. Take care.